This picture represents, again, remember the last one of the slides earlier talked about a decline in opium production. That's those last 3 years. But overall, we can see that there has been a decline in opium poppy cultivation in the past 20 years. What's really interesting is the displacement that is clear from this map, from this series of stacked bar charts, of the cultivated area between Southeast Asia, represented by Myanmar and Laos, which has declined dramatically, really dramatically over the past 20 years, and the displacement of it by Afghanistan, which represented here on this dark reddy, blacky kind of color. There are plenty of reasons for that too, but it's important to see how that's worked out and what it means in the last 3 years in Afghanistan in terms of where the product is coming from. Is essentially this part of the country. The 3 bars represent 06, 07, 06, 07, and 09. That cannot be right. Point number 2 to raise the Vienna. We have numbers for 08, so I don't know why we're... I'm sorry that this is now being recorded, because at some point I'm going to get into trouble, but I'll flip up the message to Vienna. Okay, didn't notice that last night, sorry. Moving quickly along. If you look then at where the cultivation is taking place, represented on this map, these various provinces, and you overlay that with where the main contacts with the ISAF operational groups are, you can see the connection very, very powerfully. I was privileged to work in this region about 12 years ago, and the dynamics are not dramatically different in terms of how a farmer produces, rotates the crop, doesn't try to maximize profit, tries to maintain some kind of sustainable livelihood so that the opium is actually income for medicine and school books and shoes for the kids and so forth. The way in which we are approaching the issue of poppy crop reduction in Afghanistan in connection with the operations to tackle Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are issues that really need to be looked at. Lots of numbers here, but for me and for those of you who are looking at Peter and perhaps one or two others, looking at performance success indicators, this is what this map shows. This is these are specific countries where, and this is the amount of heroin or morphine base which is assumed to flow through them. This is the amount measured in metric tons of annual seizures. And this interesting column is an indicator of effectiveness of law enforcement. In some countries, Iran, where I've also had the privilege of working, and where they do take casualties every year on the border, about 100 people get killed. Basically tackling the traffickers coming in from Western Afghanistan. And they have a relatively higher level of success. But in our region here, with the exception of China, which is only 8%, that is the assumption of how much is being taken out of the market by law enforcement interdiction. Compare that with what happens in the Americas with regard to cocaine. Normally, it's in the vicinity of 35-40% is interdicted. Much higher level of success. Why? Lots of reasons to think about, but what we do know is that this is not a very impressive tally from the point of view of effective law enforcement. That's a slide looking at the Myanmar situation, and you got that earlier. I should have taken this out too. You got that picture earlier when I showed how much the decline in our region in Southeast Asia has looked like. This is perhaps of interest to those who are looking at Myanmar as a country. Just a show of hands, anyone in the room focused, responsible for, interested in what happens in Myanmar? One.
Yeah.
For that reason?
Going out.
Okay. In fact, yes, and that's. I mean, Myanmar, a country, 80% of the migrants who are smuggled into Thailand come from Myanmar. Only 30% of there's an estimation that it's about 30-40% of people in Myanmar live below the poverty line, and so there's basically a lot of reasons for people to try to move out. But this indicates roughly where the opium is produced. I had not really got a sense of the interest of the audience this morning. Otherwise, I perhaps wouldn't put this up. The next slide is perhaps of even less interest to you, but it's an indication of within that zone where are the highest areas of poppy cultivation. Why is that important to us? Because in our drug control mandate, we try to deploy projects in those areas of highest cultivation to provide alternatives to farmers, rather than just having the enforcement authorities come in and knock the crop down and leave people with nothing. The substitution approach and the alternative development approach is what we recommend. I get a sense that you may want to ask more questions, and let me just then move quickly to, if you permit, I know it's very rude to do, but let me just move through these slides to come to what I think are responses that could make sense. One of them I talked about already. Focus on both mafias and markets. It's important to continue to target the kingpins and the organized criminal syndicates. But it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient. This is perhaps the most controversial and woolly and naive-seeming comment that you may think I will make this morning. To try to effect systems that minimize the demand for these products, at least the illicit demand. And then finally, develop a number of regional solutions. One of the points is that we are all in this together. One country cannot resolve the problem. We were using the example yesterday when I was briefing DFAT of what happened in the countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea in the 1990s and early noughties, when migrants started to be smuggled from Albania. The law enforcement responded, and then the Italian authorities responded and managed to get cooperation from the Albanians. The Albanians shut down the taps to some degree. Problem erupted then coming to that was then dealt with, taps and so forth. Problem starts to come then from Tunisia and Libya. The Italians do a huge big deal involving money for and a treaty related to Italian historical concerns and colonialism and some degree of things related to that, and then we start to see the migrants moving in from somewhere else. You have to deal with this problem at a regional or global level by states that are concerned and understand that it is a mutually reinforcing thing that they need to achieve.